As I'm sure you've heard by now, last night's Trump rally brought us a new twist on an old favorite. From the 2016 chants of "lock her up" to what just may be the theme of his 2020 campaign. The her they're referring to there is Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, one of the 4 members of the so-called squad Trump has been squabbling with, to use a euphemism, and continuing to rail against last night.
And tonight I have a suggestion for the hate-filled extremists who are constantly trying to tear our country down. They never have anything good to say. That's why I say, hey, if they don't like it, let them leave. Let them leave.
Love it or leave it. Apparently that's the official U.S. motto now. Trump did say this afternoon that he disagreed with that "send her back" chant, but didn't exactly look that way at the time. And of course, this is just the latest chapter in several days of back and forth that started with his racist tweet, about which Massachusetts' own Ayanna Pressley had this to say way back on Monday.
This is a disruptive distraction from the issues of care, concern, and consequence to the American people. I encourage the American people and all of us in this room and beyond to not take the bait.
But have we? The more we talk about this, the more we're not talking about, say, the court documents that came out today in New York showing Trump was talking to his aides about squashing rumors of affairs during the 2016 election, or his attempt to create a new rule that wouldn't let migrants claim asylum in the U.S. if they crossed through another country where they could have claimed asylum first, or the ICE raids that have indeed begun, even if at a smaller scale than was first announced. So are even never-Trumpers playing right into Trump's hands? Joining me to discuss are Sue O'Connell, political commentator on NECN. Have you ever been here before?
No, this is our first time together.
Oh, my God. Hello to you.
Thank you.
You I recognize, though. I'm Charlie Chieppo, senior fellow at the Pioneer Institute and foreign policy director for Governor Romney. It's good to see you both. Thanks so much for being here. You know, Sue, since these first racist tweets happened, whenever anyone says, "don't take the bait," exactly like
yes.
you're doing, everybody nods like this, to which I say, what does that mean?
Yeah,
Are you supposed to ignore what he says? What does not taking the bait from Donald Trump mean?
I think it means don't fall in the rabbit hole, right? I mean, you can't ignore
What does don't fall in the rabbit hole
Don't fall in the rabbit
mean?
hole means don't just spend all the time talking about the racist tweets. Do what you just did. Talk about the other issues that are happening, remembering that these are statements from the White House. They're just not tweets. They're statements. They have to be paid their due. But at the same time, we have a crisis all across America that has to be addressed. You know,
my belief is that Trump believes, Charlie, that by forcing Democrats as a whole to rally around for left-leaning, I don't mean that in a pejorative way, but that's descriptive, that the whole party appears more extreme, particularly to independents. So there is a method to this Look, madness, no?
Sadly, I think this helps him. I mean, if you look at, you know, you look at swing districts and you look at the popularity and the polling about the squad in those districts, it's terrible. So, I mean, I hate to say it, but I think that this could actually help him politically.
You know, as someone who did take the bait, and again, I don't mean this critically, I mean it observationally, was Representative Omar herself in response to the chants. Here's what she had to say.
We have said this president is racist. We have condemned his racist remarks. I believe he is fascist.
You know, intellectually I agree with what you're both saying, but emotionally, what he said, the initial tweets, is so horrible and so un-American, if I may use the term. One almost feels guilty, I almost feel guilty, not taking the bait. I mean, would you not call out racism from the most powerful person in the world? And, you know, Nancy Pelosi Nancy Pelosi did a press conference yesterday, and she starts with raising the minimum wage. We're doing this. No one wanted to hear about any of that. They all want to cut to the chase, and the chase is a lot of people think the president made really racist comments. So aren't we having an intellectual exercise that is impossible to effectuate?
Yeah, yes, and we have to address the issue. The issue is that the president made racist tweets. The president is a racist. He's putting the lives in danger. I mean, this is a man who campaigned. As soon as his campaign began, there were people who reacted to his rhetoric and then did violent things. That actually happened here in Boston. We can't just brush it aside and say it's just a ploy.
But wait, if I may, Sue says we can't just brush it aside, but I want to play a little sound from somebody who did just brush it aside. Used to work for him. The woman interviewing him works with you, the great Allison King, political reporter at NECN. Here she is catching up to Senator Mitt Romney at the airport the other day.
I certainly feel that a number of these new members of Congress have views that are not consistent with my experience and not consistent with building a strong America. At the same time, I recognize that the president has a unique and noble calling to unite all Americans, regardless of our creeds or our race or the place of our national origin. And I think in that case, the president fell far short with his comments yesterday.
Would you go as far as to say racist comments?
That's all I got. Thanks.
Okay.
Would you go as far as to say racist comments? That's all I got. Thanks. Why can't he? By the way, he isn't running for re-election in 5.5 years. The conventional wisdom is every Republican worried about their re-election doesn't want to cross Trump. Right. He's going to be 80 years old when he runs for re-election.
Look, I don't get it. I really, when he ran for this job and won, I was really hoping that, all this sort of political artifice would go away because he wasn't running for anything else. But it's very disappointing.
You know what this reminds us of? Remember the Goodridges, Julie and Hillary Goodridge, when they went to his door when he was the governor of Massachusetts, and they talked about how marriage equality was important to their family, and they said, what should we tell our daughter?
Well.
And he said, why didn't you think of that? You know, I mean, this is classic Mitt Romney.
Nancy Pelosi also took the bait, I would argue, with the resolution that passed Democrats plus 4 Republicans and the former Republican who's now an independent. But she didn't take the bait on the impeachment thing yesterday. Bob Mueller's testifying next week.
Can't wait.
Preet Bharara was here a few months ago, and what Preet said is even if he does nothing but that which he said he's going to do, which is stay within the 4 corners, when you read the words, they're much more impactful. Well, the day after Mueller can and should, if he says, obviously, what's in the report, which he obviously will, can and should Nancy Pelosi, who says this guy self-impeaches every day, should she maintain this strategic position?
I think we need to see what the reaction is. I mean, look, I think we need to realize that the average American, all they've heard about, all they really know about the Mueller report is no collusion, no obstruction. They don't know what's in there. They're not paying attention. When he says it and it gets covered, I think that may change things. Will it be enough to really sort of make her go for impeachment? I don't know that that's a good move before this next election, but she's a better judge of that than I am.
And by the way, yesterday there were close to 100 votes in favor of proceeding with this. Obviously, the majority of Democrats themselves, I think, following Pelosi's lead, did not vote for this thing. So obviously it didn't go anywhere, this impeachment resolution from Congressman Green.
Yeah, I agree.
Pelosi
has to slow roll this. I mean, yes. I think that's the only way to thread this needle is to go forward with, if she believes that there's impeachable acts, that she needs to go forward with it, but she has to also be political about it, because I think on any given day, the American public doesn't have a great appetite for impeachment proceedings.
Can I make a transition that is impossible from impeachment to transportation? Your favorite topic.
Yeah.
We try to go out of our way on this show to be fair when discussing things like a crisis in transportation. I want to know, we have been inviting State Transportation Secretary Stephanie Pollack on for months. On Monday, we asked in an email whether she's ever going to do any interviews again. We are still waiting for a response. Here's a quiz for you, too. Yesterday, I think the poll came out. Start with you. Who's the most popular governor in America?
Charlie Baker.
Who's the most popular governor in America?
Charlie Baker, according to
Didn't lose a point from 3 months ago before all this stuff happened. 73% then, 73%. Does that surprise you? I mean, beyond the transportation mess, and we all know what happened at the registry, and because those envelopes didn't get opened, a guy was allowed to drive, 7 motorcyclists lost their life. Problems in DCF, even though I think to Baker's credit, he's focused a lot on DCF. The state cops still at some level of crisis. It hasn't affected his popularity one drop.
Yeah, no, I'm surprised. I didn't expect to see a precipitous drop, but I expected it to drop a few points.
So why hasn't it?
I think he's built up a lot of goodwill. I think people like him. I think people think he's working hard, and I think that goes a long way. I also, by the way, think that it's also not a bad thing, and don't underestimate the fact that he is not running for anything else and doesn't have any interest in running for anything else.
Well, except there was a story leaked, not leaked, but given, I think, to Frank Phillips, that at least his people are contemplating a third term. And the story that it's hard to say.
But I mean anything other than governor.
Oh, I'm sorry. That may be most egregious. I never heard of this guy before, but there's a story in the Globe about a guy who's in charge of the subdivision where the 53 bins or whatever they were, the bins of these unopened notifications, which should have caused licenses to be suspended, weren't open. The day those bins are discovered is the day he starts his vacation in London. He stays there for the game between the Yankees and the Red Sox, doesn't come home, isn't ordered home.
No, it's amazing.
Almost
It's
makes you
jaw-dropping.
speechless.
I think about all the times that people around me went into work when there was a crisis at work, and not because they were the CEO, but because their department was in crisis or their department needed some extra work. I mean, it is unbelievable that someone would not cut short a vacation to come back.
I want to talk about if this will change it. Marty Walsh and Charlie Baker have a close relationship. By the way, I love that they have a close relationship. One of the lead Democrats, obviously the lead Republican, in contrast to the disgraceful partisanship in Washington. But here's what Walsh is really getting a little upset about the transportation thing is he wrote a letter to Stephanie Pollack, and part said, as we know, she's the Secretary of Transportation, the MBTA is not currently a functional service for many of the residents in Boston. My residents need the T. I still firmly believe we need better service on a faster timeline. Is that going to change the equation? He's a pretty popular guy, runs the biggest city, and essentially, even though he doesn't name him, he's criticizing the leader of our state, who everybody knows he's a close ally. Does that change anything?
I think that Marty Walsh is doing what he needs to do politically. I think Walsh and Baker will likely talk this through behind the scenes and probably come up with the usual kabuki of I'm going to say this.
Walsh
and
announced he has a meeting with Pollack. We learned this afternoon next week.
I don't think in any meaningful way it will change.
What Walsh could do, I think, and what the Office of the Mayor could do is they could declare some sort of emergency, like a snow emergency, to open up more lanes for bus lanes, or demand that there be some sort of transportation addition to maybe cars, or maybe commandeer Ubers. I mean, he could make some grand gesture that some might think is a stunt, but also might have a reaction if he actually says that this is a city emergency.
So you might want to listen to him on Boston Public Radio on Friday tomorrow and find out. It's good to see you, Charlie. Thanks so much. It's a thrill to finally have you.
Get a tingle.
There'll be more. A tingle.